Absolutely.
Okay, but Lindsay is correct. We should probably give folks a minute. Well, I think Lindsay, let's wait till 6:02.
Okay.
The end of 6:02, and then we'll. But welcome everyone. While we wait for folks to filter in, please know that we are really excited to have you here this evening. We will be recording, so if you can't stay for the whole presentation, you can check out the full presentation online tomorrow with slides, and we also will share slide decks and what have you tomorrow. If you have a question at any time, we've talked to all of the panelists tonight. If there are any questions, you can use the Q&A feature, and Lindsay and myself will be keeping an eye on that. And we'll try to look for natural breaks in the discussion. But all of the panelists would love your feedback and thoughts on this topic. It should be an exciting one. I think, Viet, if I'm not mistaken, the last time we started this discussion was in July. So yes. It was an interesting discussion that night, and I'm really excited for the specifics that we're going to get into tonight.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
All right, so we're 6:02 now. We've got 17 people in the audience thus far, very excited. I'm going to go ahead and get things rolling. Welcome, this is the Association of Physician Assistants of Cardiology, our third webinar of 2020, Advanced Degrees and Extra Credentials, Just Professional Degree Padding or Essential for PA Progress. Very excited to get into this topic. We have two board members, Laura Ross, who is the treasurer of APAC, and Viet Lee. We also are joined tonight by Dr. Joseph Tomasino and Dr. Is it Politi? Politi, Dr. Victor Politi.
Victor Politi, yes.
There we go. If we could go to the next slide, I just want to make sure we also thank our sponsors tonight. So as you can see here, we are so grateful for all of the support across the industry. We have EKG in action, the American Association of Physician Assistants, the American College of Cardiology, the African Heritage Caucus of the Physician Assistants, Cardiometabolic Health Congress, and AtriCure. Thank you to our sponsors and partners. We could not do any of what we do without your help. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor or partner, let us know. And go ahead and go next slide here. And I would like to turn, so my name is Jennifer, and I also am joined by Lindsay. We are going to be your moderators for tonight, so we'll be checking the chat feature, making sure the technology is working. And I was going to turn it over to Lindsay to give us just some brief background on the folks who'll be presenting tonight. Our board members, like I mentioned, Viet and Laura are presenting tonight, and we are led by Kevin Niles and Michael Clark. But if you go to the next slide there. Okay, yeah, so Lindsay, why don't you go ahead and start with our webinar host?
Yeah, thank you all for joining us tonight. So we have Laura Ross. She will be our first presenter tonight. She is APAC treasurer. Her experience doing social work for patients through the Lutheran Volunteer Corps led her to desire to provide effective and efficient healthcare. She has been a cardiology physician assistant since 2004, when she graduated from Rosalind Franklin University of Medicine and Science in Chicago. She works at the Park Nicollet Heart and Vascular Center near Minneapolis. The variety offered by rounding in a suburban hospital and clinic, as well as outreach to a more rural site, has provided opportunities to do a little bit of everything in cardiology, from managing CHF, prevention, structural heart disease, and CAD. It has been an honor to represent PAs at the ACC Interventional Council, committees, and think tank roundtable discussions. So that's Laura, she's presenting first. Then we have Viet, he is APAC president-elect. Viet obtained a BS in exercise science athletic training in 2001 from the University of Utah and obtained a master's of physician assistant studies in 2004 from the University of Utah School of Medicine. He has practiced 7 years in occupational medicine, 8 years in cardiology, and since 2012 has held the position as cardiovascular scientist with the Intermountain Heart Institute Cardiology Research. His primary focus is CV research, collaborating across multiple cardiac subspecialties on a vast array of trials, studies, and continues to see patients in a general cardiology practice. He is part-time faculty at the Rocky Mountain University of Health Professions PA program and currently working on a doctorate.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's go to the next slide if we can. Thank you, Viet. Next, we have Dr. Joseph Tomasino, who is a past APAC president. He is the department chair of the physician assistant program at Toro College School of Health Sciences in New York and the vice president of physician assistant program development and operations for the Toro College and University systems. He graduated from Long Island University's physician assistant program in 1983. He has a PhD and a master's degree. Additionally, he is a graduate of the Montefiore, I probably messed that up, Dr. T, Hospital and Medical Center postgraduate surgical PA program. He is a past president of APAC and he has been active for many years in the ACC. Additionally, served as one of the primary authors of the new cholesterol guidelines and recently retired from the Army Reserve Specialist Corps as a colonel after 34 years of service. Lastly, we have Dr. Victor Politi. He is a former president and chief executive officer of the New Health System, also called the Nassau Healthcare Corporation, a teaching facility and public safety net provider, which operates the Nassau University Medical Center, a Holly Patterson extended care facility, 5 LI federally qualified family health centers, and a school-based clinic. In his capacity as New Health's leader, Dr. Politi managed the New Health healthcare delivery system, providing quality care to most vulnerable residents with 3,500 employees and a budget of $567 million. Dr. Politi is a fellow of the American College of Physicians, the American College of Emergency Medicine, and a member of the American Board of Occupational and Environmental Medicine. Dr. Politi serves on the Regional Emergency Medical Service Council for New York City as well as Nassau County. Dr. Politi completed medical school while working as a police officer for the New York City Police Department, rising to the rank of lieutenant in the Emergency Service Unit. Dr. Politi is also a distinguished professor of medicine for Toro University of Health Sciences and an instructor for the CTOS group.
Wow.
You guys are impressive, my goodness. Well, with those introductions, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Laura and Viet. And again, if you have questions or comments, please note the Q&A section or the chat. Lindsay and I will be manning that, but we will proceed without further ado. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yes, we're so excited that you all are here today. And, you know, the idea of this webinar, as Jennifer alluded to, was in the summer, we talked about what are some of the barriers to practicing as a PA, not only in a time of COVID, but also beyond. So trying to think of how can we increase our knowledge, our relevance, our marketability. You know, many of us went through furloughs in our departments when volumes were low because of COVID, and what are ways we could, you know, fill some of our time and also, again, increase our knowledge base and help patients. So I've listed a few of the opportunities. There are so many ways we can do this, but I really started with kind of the least amount of monetary investment as well as time investment. And as we go through these different designations and certifications, we'll end with kind of the bigger time commitments of a doctorate level. So we're excited to walk through this with you and would love to hear your feedback as well. So I think what I'll start with is where I met a lot of these wonderful people on the board here of the Association of PAs in Cardiology is actually through the American College of Cardiology. So they've been a fantastic advocate for all the cardiovascular team members. And one thing you can do is to apply for this designation as an AACC or Associate of the American College of Cardiology. This requires about 5 years of cardiovascular experience and then 2 letters of recommendations from physicians who are fellows in the college. And although there aren't a lot of requirements, I really think of this as a door opener. So with this qualification, I got to know other people on committees, be asked to sit on guideline committees, be the PA representative, and voice in a lot of the decisions that the American College of Cardiology has, and also some publications. So it was a small investment that really opened doors. Something similar through the AAPA, of which APAC is a constituent organization, meaning that we're kind of an arm of AAPA, is a distinguished fellow of the AAPA. So they use a point system, and once you get up to 100 points, you can apply to become a fellow. And that's a little more intensive. They talk about what are your professional achievements, leadership, interaction with the AAPA, learning and community service, and then have an interview with another distinguished fellow to see if you can get that designation. And again, really, I think of those as door openers. Now, as we move down the continuum of what costs more money and more time investment, but also can really arm you again with knowledge and marketability, is certifications. So one that I'm particularly familiar with, as I'll be taking this 4-hour exam next week, is the clinical lipid specialist. And we'll talk about that more on the next slide. There's also certification of hypertension clinician. These are really geared toward nurse practitioners and PAs and physicians, and how can you bolster your knowledge. And you can add these extra letters after your name, to help bolster that. For me personally, I am our organization's lipid conference presenter. And so there's 4 or 5 conferences a year that I talk about lipid management. And so for me personally, I was able to go to my board and say, I need a couple $1,000s to help build up the CME and take these tests. And they are very supportive. After that, we'll talk about the CAQ exams. And so those are offered in 7 specialties: CV surgery, emergency medicine, nephrology, hospital medicine, psychiatry, orthopedic surgery, and pediatrics. And I went on to the AAPA huddle. Within our board, we didn't have a lot of experience because there isn't a cardiology CAQ. And I asked the AAPA huddle, what do you guys think about the CAQ exams? And what I found is that people who had taken them thought that they were really helpful, especially if you were, newer in your career. That there was one person who thought it really helped them establish themselves, particularly in a rural clinic, and help them become more hireable. And in fact, in one practice, it was mandated that all the providers in that specialty have a CAQ exam. So that was really interesting. And I'm kind of hopeful maybe they'd come up with something like that for general cardiology as well. Didn't really result in a higher salary when I asked those individuals, at least the ones who had responded, but it could help, again, if people are looking for furloughs or who might bring a little more to the table, this could be something. And then talking about more of a time investment, certainly would be fellowships and residencies. And these really vary. There isn't a general certifying body that will regulate what do fellowships and residencies, they're really interchangeable, offer for PAs. And they vary from a year to a year and a half. Really, people thought these were most helpful for new grads when I pulled the APA huddle and on Twitter, especially if you're going to be in rural health, kind of running an ER with your supervising physician, not on site, that it really is almost a boot camp. Also could be helpful. One of the commenters said when they switched specialties, they did a residency in ICU because they had done something very different from that in the past. And they thought that was really helpful. And that if you do a fellowship, that really would get you ready to do a CAQ exam. A lot of the people who responded said, it shouldn't just be cheap labor. A lot of times fellows or resident PAs that are finishing their residency might be just used as cheap labor. They should offer CME, grand rounds, opportunities to round within different parts, and really be a learning opportunity to be the most successful. People commented if they had done a fellowship, ER and critical care was really helpful. The pay is about half as much, at the programs I looked at, as someone who's graduated as a PA. And so I think it really takes a lot of drive and knowledge and wanting to gain that experience to be able to sacrifice, getting paid like your classmates versus going into a specialty and doing that. And then we'll also talk about the doctorate level with Dr. Tomasino and Viet, talking about what are some options in that avenue for PAs. So Viet, if you want to advance the slide. Great. So this is just an example of what I have to do to sit for the clinical lipid special exam. You get 50 points just for being a PA that's certified, and then trying to gain points in these other ways: publications, faculty appointments, research, or 2 points per CME hour. So that would be 50 hours in just lipidology, if that's the only other 50 points that you have. And so it took me about 2 years to really gain enough credentials to even apply for the exam. And then the next slide will highlight what that exam breakdown. If any of you practice lipidology, about a quarter is pharmacologic medicine, and then thankfully only 3% is vascular biology. They don't focus as much on that, but also really looking at clinical trials, nutrition and exercise. I was happy to see it was that high. So, within the CLS exam, I think it's been helpful for lots of reasons, but it also helped me start a plant-based clinic within my cardiology clinic, as I gained a lot more knowledge about using food as medicine in conjunction with our traditional guideline medical treatment. And so I would highly recommend, branching out, gaining some more knowledge, having your department support you, and then see, what else you can offer to your patients in your department. So happy to answer any questions or hear from anybody out there who has done a CAQ exam or who has completed a fellowship. It sure would be interesting to hear your perspective if you're comfortable sharing. And feel free to type a message in the chat and we can unmute you. Otherwise, we'll give it a minute, and if we've just wowed you, we'll just keep going with the with the doctorate discussion.
That was fantastic. I had just gotten on the huddle today, actually. You might have seen my lengthy reply to your initial question. And I thought it was just as interesting looking at the comments on CAQ's residency and fellowship. There was a lot, there's kind of a back and forth regarding the CAQs.
And Viet, it looks like we have a question from the audience. Do you study on your own, or are there specific study guides? And I think that's a great question. I was kind of curious about what, is it self-paced, or is there some, Viet's posted a lot of great resources already in the chat, but maybe talk a little bit about that.
For the clinical lipid specialist, it is, there are classes or exams you can pay for through their website to take, and CME to take, and a master's in lipidology class that you can study along, and that prepares you for the exam. As far as CAQ exams, that's a great question. I imagine there's a similar kind of template for what's included in the exam, but does anyone on the call know if there's a particular study guide for each CAQ exam? Something we definitely can look into.
I'm not familiar with any specific, only because I haven't myself looked at obtaining a CAQ. There's nothing in just pure cardiovascular medicine. It's the CT surgery group. So I haven't looked into it. Joe, are you familiar with any?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything formal out there. The thing about the CAQ exams is that they don't really test competency. I mean, you could take a test and get board certified in surgery and not be able to tie a surgical knot. So, so again, they have their limitations. I think that Laura's, I think the big take home from Laura, is that for people who are just getting started, that's an incredible foundation that they could be armed with information and knowledge, because that is the foundation of medicine. And then medicine carries on. Really, it's an apprenticeship. It's all about experience. So you can study all you want, and then you need, once you start taking care of patients and apply what you do, that's where the real learning occurs. And that's the medical model, right? They go to medical school.
Yeah, and Dr. T, it looks like Kevin, and it looks like he's unmuted too. So Kevin Niles, current APAC president, wanted to add a comment too about the study opportunities. Kevin, can you?
I just wanted to share my experience from the APA-CVS, which is the association. It's the constituent organization of the AAPA for cardiovascular surgical PAs, and we did write and provide and maintain a guideline for the CAQ that AAPA used. So those books, I guess, those resources would depend on the constituent organizations to put together. So as the Association for Cardiology PAs, that's something that we could look at organizing if AAPA decided to offer a CAQ in cardiology. I think we would be the group that would maintain that resource. Anyway, so that was my experience with APA CVS. So there are some resources out there, and I'm going to say it's probably going to vary to quite a degree depending on what constituent organization is involved with organizing it and how they're maintaining it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin. And then it looks like another participant, and Viet, I think you saw that one as well. Do you want to just speak to that other chat comment about the NCCPA?
Yeah. So it sounds like Dakota, one of our attendees, is reporting that there are blueprints for the CAQs. I'm just looking at the website over here on my third monitor. It's interesting. I mean, you have to sit for it. You have to have at least 4,000 hours of experience, so 2 years, essentially. And that speaks to your comments, Joe, and you know, you have to practice. You have to practice. You can't just study. It has to be put into practice. And I imagine you felt the same way, Laura, as you have been doing lipid, you know, seeing lipid patients and studying. It's one thing, but unless you actually have some practice in it, it doesn't stick. Doesn't stick.
And it looks like we have one, I think maybe a comment or a question from Joseph DeLeo. Is that correct? I'm not sure if he still wants to make a comment, but he had his hand raised.
Feel free to unmute. Joseph, if you have a comment or a question.
No, I'm good. I don't know why it was raised. I just wanted to thank everybody for being here tonight.
No, thank you. I'll have to, you know, I have to say, it's funny, Zoom, I've had people on their cell phones start to annotate notes on someone's slides. So you might have raised your hand.
I think that's a good start to the discussion, and I want to make sure we keep things moving. But thank you guys so much for the questions and the comments. I'll turn things back over to you guys.
Okay, so I guess that's me. You know, I like this. You know, the sky's truly the limit, and it really comes from what your motivations are and what your ambitions are in terms of the PA profession. You know, I'm coming back to this title: advanced degrees and/or extra credentials. Are they just padding, or are you know, is this essential for PA progress? And so hopefully I follow that up here with, it's in the PA DNA. It really is. You know, it's part of our profession. We have to have hours of patient contact, thousands of hours of patient contact before we even apply to PA school. And, you know, it's just, you have to remember that 2 years does not prepare one for all situations. We have a really, it's not basic, but it's 2 years. And in comparison to our physician partners, that means we have a lot of learning and lifelong learning, just as they do. So when you think about it, you know, we can be hired to any specialty. After appropriate training and certification, you can perform many different procedures, and that's state-based or system-based, etc. Depending on your practice parameters, you can treat all or most patients. And then practice in the outpatient and the inpatient settings. You know, those are two different settings, and you have to be a lifelong learner to transition from one to the other. You know, part of our certification is that every 2 years, you have 100 CME hours that you have to attain. And then we recertify every 10 years. It's in the PA DNA. We have to be lifelong learners. And the way you do that, it depends on where your path is. So here, you know, I'm talking about the Doctor of Medical Science. And I think you'll learn a lot from Dr. Tomasino's presentation here. For me, the path for DMSC really came out of a need for progression in my own path as a researcher and also as faculty. But, you know, this is kind of a busy slide to a certain extent, but you can see on your far left here, let me just walk you through it, are the programs that I looked at. There may be a few more out there. Rocky Mountain College just barely received their accreditation in September, so they're a little bit new on the block. AT Still and Lynchburg have been out for a little bit here. And, you can go to their websites if you want to, but these are the tracks or concentrations that are available at each of those Doctor of Medical Science programs. And so you can see, you can be an educator or industry, clinical practice, etc. I think this is where Dr. Tomasino will really fall into in his talk. But, as for post PA school training, these are a little bit more administrative and or academic. And that's what I would say about the DMSC, is that really, I think the focus there is, do I have a slightly different path than just clinical practice? Although in here, there are several areas where they do have clinical practice involved. And I would submit to you that if they do have a DMSC in advanced clinical practice or clinical practice, there should be some clinical practicum involved and vigorous or rigorous didactics that are also paired with a DMSC if you're going to use it as almost like a fellowship to a doctorate. So you can see the semester hours involved. Certainly on the far end, the outlier here is Butler University. And then the accreditation, where do they, is this just kind of an out of the box? Do I get it in a cereal box? What's happening here? So they're accredited. And then the tuition can be staggering if you're working. Unlike PA school, where, they tell you don't work, you're going to do 40 hours plus through your didactic, and you're going to be in your seat 8 to 5 and longer. And then, your clinical year is going to be all sorts of crazy hours. And so there's no way to work. Well, here we are. We're already in our professional careers, and do I, try a doctorate? Most of these are online with some mix of being in person. And so, then it becomes, gosh, can you really learn online? And I would say, yeah, if you're talking about, ways to educate or learning how to educate or learning some of the healthcare leadership administration stuff. So it's like a master's of health administration, but on steroids, right? For a doctorate for clinical PAs that have been out in practice. So then let me just kind of throw this in there. If you're going to do a DMSC, find your why. Figure out why you're going to do it, and then ask yourself, why? Because once I started on the path, I was like, oh my gosh, I immediately regret this. It was so much work. And that's on me. I was a little bit perhaps arrogant, thinking that, oh man, I've been doing a lot of stuff, so this should come really easy. It wasn't. It was really new material, and it was humbling. So I kind of thought, oh man, I really regret this. But, for me, my whys were this. I'm a research PA. The master's is a ceiling for grants, proposals, and becoming a principal investigator. Now, I am a principal investigator on one of my studies, but it's an investigator-initiated study at my system. I didn't go out to get a grant on an NIH level or anything like that. As a master's, it's very difficult to do so. And then long-term academics. I am part-time faculty, and I thought, a DMSC, and my concentration track is health professions education with a health care leadership administration certificate. I was looking long-term. Maybe I want to kind of move over to academics full-time. And then lastly, I have a clinical administrative role currently. And if I stay in my current clinical position, and I argue that we are all administrators. You may not think as a PA, oh, I'm not an administrator, I see patients. That's bull. You administer, to your staff, MAs, RNs. You are part of that process, and you may be in a hiring position, and that might have just been something that you walked into after being a PA in your clinic for a few years, or even a couple months, depending on your situation. But all of us have an administrative role to some degree, and the question is how far do you want to take that? So, the current DMSC student path for me, I started in April of 2019, and the initial projected graduation has passed, as you can see, August 2020. Life happened to all of us, and it happened to me as well. And so I had to reorganize my schedule. And now my new projected graduation is a year down the road. It's even further as I realized, I can only bite off so much in my current duties and what I've been trying to accomplish. So I wanted to make this real, because a DMSC is something you don't just lightly jump into. It's anywhere from $25,000 to up to $40,000, and where are you going to get that cash? And now it's not just money throwing towards something; it's time. And so, meanwhile, in the period of time that I had to reorganize my entire DMSC projected graduation, I've been publishing papers. It's not like I've been sitting still. I co-chair and moderate several CME webinars in a series that it's ongoing. Multiple abstracts, papers, etc. I've been invited as a panelist. So I'm still doing stuff, and life doesn't stop suddenly. There's family. I didn't even include this picture behind me. We still go on hikes to Moab, masked, but we still do things as a family. And so you have to remember that when you take on something like this, find your why, and then ask why. Why am I doing this, and what am I doing it for? And that's, again, from my point, it's the academic side and research. We'll see as Dr. Tomasina gives us his take on this, where that moves towards the clinical practice side. Let's see, from a timing standpoint, I guess I finished a little bit early, but I'd love to engage if there are folks that have questions on my own DMSC journey.
While we let folks get a minute, Viet, could you just restate again why you wanted to go for this program? What was your initial why?
Yeah, so for me, and I don't know if I can, I have this, but there we go. Okay, so for me, it's those three things. I am a research PA, and I've been in the research position for since 2012. And I mean, it's just been a fantastic position for me. I've been part of large-scale clinical trials. We were in the SPRINT trial. I've been part of the Fourier trial. We were in Improve It, our own initiated study of factor 64. Looks at, it was a novel CTA study in diabetes. And so all of these things kind of moved me like, hey, I design studies too. I just can't be principal investigator without that doctorate. So it was quite motivating to me to move to that position where I needed a DMSC, and I needed the education. I didn't just need the paper, actually. So let me just make that firm in your minds, is to me, it wasn't just another padding. I needed the information as an educator, part-time faculty. I needed to level up my game there. But the Healthcare Leadership Administration allows me to better understand how my role is as a principal investigator in a healthcare system, in navigating all the insurance issues, value-based versus fee-for-service, all those kind of things. We needed to, or I needed to understand rather as a principal investigator, because studies, they exist in the real world and they affect real people. So,
Viet, Amy, who's also part of our APAC leadership team, had a question. What was, as you kind of laid out in that really detailed slide, what was the most challenging aspect of the program, in your opinion? That's the Amy question here. Most challenging aspect of the program?
Timing. Timing has been the most challenging. It's adding on, right? I already feel like with the many things that I like to say yes to, it's like I'm going up the canyon. I'm already in, 3 low. It's just going on, and I'm like, hey, look, there's people. Let's jump on in. Get on in. If you can run next to it, just jump on into the car. And I feel like that's what's happened. Is it just the load is very heavy, and time is something it's a commodity, and it's very hard to carve out those pieces. So that's been the most challenging aspect, is being able to keep up with the reading, being able to keep up with the discussion, because that's how it works on the online side. You have to be able to interact with your classmates. It's not like this easy peasy thing. You read and then you discuss and you formulate your own thoughts, and then you have to, discuss with others on their thoughts. So it's still time. it's still time, and that's the most challenging part for me, is carving out extra time amongst having 3 kids that span from just graduated from high school, still in elementary, and then all these fun things that happen in the time of COVID.
One of the other questions, I think this is a great question as well, so please keep them coming. After obtaining your doctorate, how will you present yourself to your clinical patients?
Viet. I will always be Viet. I don't carry any airs whatsoever. It's the funniest thing, but patients, no matter how many times you tell them, I am a PA. You know that, but it's easier to just call you Dr. Viet. Okay, but I'm a PA. The DMSC will be from an academic and research position. So yes, I won't present to my patient any differently. I'm PA, I'm Viet. But in those other arenas of research as a principal investigator, I will call people on it. I will say, no, it is Dr. Lee. I worked for this, and it's my research position. In the academic world, as a part-time faculty, it makes me it feels weird to me. But in the research position, that's where I feel like this is truly a doctorate for me.
Awesome. Another question here, and then maybe one more question after that. What might you anticipate for an increased earning potential at your organization following your program completion? And I think that's going to be a question and a theme throughout, as we learned in July, because even if you hadn't been furloughed, I know there were cuts, and Viet, you actually helped us do that research. So, what you've already kind of alluded to it with the research component and your ability to basically be the head of a research project, but maybe talk a little bit about what it could mean, maybe not necessarily for you, but beyond having that title. What could it mean for salary and promotion opportunities? And Kevin actually has a comment in here, if you can see it, a little bit about going up into academia and being a senior staffer as well. So.
Yeah, so these are excellent questions, and always money kind of drives some of the motivation in all of this. I will say that the biggest gain for me was going from, obviously there are probably PAs here that are athletic trainers or continue to keep their certification. That was my biggest jump in salary, but that was in 2004, going from ATC to PA. But as a PA, I think naturally my salary has gone up as I've done more and more things. For me, I don't see that this doctorate in my current position as a researcher changes too much. And I don't say that to discourage you from doing it. For me, it opens up many more potential doors where if I, as a clinician PA researcher, that's a different salary model than if I become director of cardiovascular research. It'll be a totally different jump in salary. That's not the position I want right now. I want to continue doing what I do. So the doctorate's kind of a slow fuse for me. What it does allow me to do is continue to do at a better, deeper, richer experience what I already do as a researcher. All the things that I've developed, all the projects that I've already written, they're ready to go as me as principal investigator, and then to go after those NIH grants. I'm in a value-based system at Intermountain Healthcare, and so we don't compete well in terms of salary. The benefits are great, but what drives me is the research.
That's wonderful. And I think some of those other questions and where you can go with these degrees, we might get into more with Dr. T and Dr. P. So I want to make time. Maybe one last question, and then I think we should keep moving on. Any other questions? Okay, well then I think we shall soldier on, Viet. Since you are ground control, you just tell us where we're headed.
Okay, well there you are, Dr. Tomasino.
All right, next slide. Thank you, Viet. That probably was one of the better presentations I've heard on the doctoral level degree. And Laura, your presentation was absolutely excellent. And I think that whoever thought of this whole concept and put it together without really a lot of organization, I think it's going to come together nicely. So really, my role here is really a brief discussion of my journey in the PA profession. I don't have much time because my wife's going to bring in a warm glass of milk, and I'm going to be going to bed shortly. With all the youth here that's on the line. So I'll try to keep it quick. It's nice to see that youth is prevailing. So I'm going to talk a little about postgraduate clinical training, my Montefiore experience. I don't know if Dr. Clark is on the line, but Dr. Clark is a fraternity brother of mine. We both attended that postgraduate program back in the 80s when it was very, when it was a highly respected program at its point in time. And then we'll talk a little bit about, we'll caveat and talk about the post-degree development. Development should be ENT, but we missed that. So again, thank you for inviting me on this. If we can go to the next slide. So how it all began for me is I started off 18 years old. I was in the 82nd Airborne. I did not want to go to college. I was tired of school, even though I was a pretty good student, advanced placement classes. I had the opportunity to go to West Point. I just was tired of school. I didn't want to have any part of it. And my dad said, nope, you're not sitting home. So he took me down to the recruiting station. Next thing I was jumping out of planes. And that started. And what's important about that journey is that's where I met PAs. I met two specific PAs, one who graduated with a PhD from Oxford and also attended the Montefiore program. And he certainly became my mentor. So that's how that started. I went to PA school as soon as I got out to 81 to 83. And then I went to Montefiore for 3 years. That's where I first met Michael. And then a few years after that, or actually quite a few years, I think in 96, Clara Vanderbilt, who was the director of that program, developed a combined master's degree with LIU, combining it with your experience that you had at Montefiore. So it was less credits, and they offered that program for a few years and it sort of died out. But I did get a master's degree in health science way back in 96, before it was popular to have a master's degree as a PA. I did earn my PhD, and I really want to point out that the PhD back in 1999 didn't do anything for me being a PA in clinical medicine, and it didn't change anything I did. At the end of the day, I still was a PA. And just 2 comments on the degrees. I started that there weren't very many people with any kind of doctoral level degrees back then. So for the name issue, that became an issue. Obviously, Viet was also, you know, when you're a PA practicing, everybody calls you doctor. So it was very clear. I made sure I had clear identity on my white coat, said physician assistant. I had a name tag that said physician assistant, but I also included my PhD initials after that because I earned that PhD. So that's important. Next slide. I'll try to, so this is the first paper that I wrote, and the stimulus for this was, back then, I think I was on the NISPA board, ready to become the NISPA president for the New York State Society. This is my first stab at looking at the profession. And what I saw was that when I went to Montefiore, I was very fortunate that I was exposed to incredible clinical experiences, and I developed clinical skills that were just surpassed most normal family doctors. And even then, back then, there were no board certified emergency physicians. And when I left there and I went to go work in the ER and at a community hospital, I basically was the highest trained person that was working in the ER at one point. I certainly wasn't paid for it, but I certainly was. They really appreciated my skills and the things I could do with trauma and critical care, and I became the go-to person. So I had realized that back then, and what I had realized is I was working here and I saw these physicians who had gone through, 8 years of medical school, internship, fellowship. Some of them were family docs, some of them never got board certified, some of them never got matched. They were able to practice in New York as long as you did your internship. And so they were being paid 3 or 4 times what I was being paid to do my job. And I was getting no credit for the hard work that I had done at that particular point, again, in the middle of a PhD program. And so that's when I wrote The Dilemma of the One Rung Ladder. So what I realized then when I wrote this is that we boxed ourselves in as a profession. And if you look at the nurses back then, the nurses had levels of nursing. They had nurse anesthetists. They had different tracks that you could be in. And they got compensated for their training and experience. Whereas PAs, you could have been the best PA in the world, the best cardiac surgical PA, which I'd spent a lot of years with, and I got paid well, but you didn't get any real recognition for your skills and the level that you were being utilized for. And again, I wrote this article that basically said that we really have boxed ourselves into a one rung ladder. When I originally wrote it, I wrote it with the thought that maybe there should be a bridge to medical school. If PAs wanted to go to medical school, there should be some bridge because we've already had the foundational training. We've already had the clinical experience. So there should be some way we can take this and go to the next level. And the truth is that when you, and Dr. Politi will expand on this, is that most doctors who can't get boarded or licensed can't pass the first part of the boards. And the first part of the boards talks about the basic sciences and the research and the high level stuff. And if you want to be a physician, you have to be able to know that information. And if you think you know more than the doctors, then I don't know what to say. You got a bigger ego than anybody I know. But the reality is that we don't. Clinical experience and knowledge are two different things. And I think the exam talk we had, I think, gives a good example of that. So here we are 22 years later, and we still have a one rung ladder. The next slide. So on the train, I'm sitting, coming in from Manhattan. I have one of my offices, one of my programs in Manhattan. And I look at the wall, and this big mural is up there. And it says, when your industry has changed, but your degree hasn't, it matters. And this was from Adelphi University. And it could have been somebody standing there and smack me in the face as hard as you could. And I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what's going on. I'm watching this happen right in front of me. And that's when I started to develop the doctoral of physician assistant studies. And I always, when I speak about this, I always use I always try to refer to this as if you think of somebody who is a biochemist. They do a bachelor's degree and they get a biochemistry degree, and they're a biochemist. They're working in a lab as a biochemist. They go on and get their master's as a master's in biochemistry, and they usually work their way up the ladder. And ultimately, they go on and get their PhD in biochemistry, and they run a lab, they run research projects, and do whatever. There's a ladder. And at the end of the day, guess what? He's still a biochemist, but he's worked his way up the ladder. As a PA, you can be a PA and do the internship at Montefiore and finish that, have all these extra skills, work in cardiac surgery like Kevin does, and open the chest, take the mammary down, put the patient on bypass, help the surgeon do the bypass operation. At the end of the day, you're still a PA. You got no credit for the expertise and clinical acumen you've developed over years of, it may not even be years. It doesn't have to be years, but over time to be with training. So that's when I developed this Doctor of Physician Studies, and that program is up and running at Doctoral University worldwide. It's an online program. And Dr. Politi will talk more in detail about that. The other part is I wanted to talk a little bit about Montefiore, and then I could finish up there with the last two slides. Is that so the Montefiore experience, as Laura said, there are lots of opportunities out there to do these postgraduate programs. Most of them, in my experience now, they're not accredited. The ARC is no longer accrediting them. So they're really not accredited. And unfortunately, the quality of the newer programs from the ones that my students have asked me in the research I've done are basically ways to pay somebody less money to do more work, and with the promise of getting more clinical skills. And my alumni, Montefiore, is a good example of that. Montefiore is a shadow of a program of what it once was. Back in the 80s, when they changed the law for residents, so they started to change that law where residents were only allowed to work 10 minutes without sleeping for 4 hours. They needed more PAs. It opened a door for us. And so that was the opportunity for more of these programs to open, and they did. And some of them just didn't survive. But there are some great programs out there. Don't get me wrong. There's a great anesthesia program out there at Yale. There's a critical care program, I think someplace in Baltimore, shock trauma. Duke still has a great surgical program. So there are some great programs out there with years of reputation behind them. And then we talked about the doctoral level. So one of the things, and when I talk about clinical training, is I also developed what we call within our program, 28 months is advanced clinical training tracks. So what that means is if you want to be a critical care PA and you graduate and you go to a hospital and says, I want to work in critical care, they laugh at you, right? You got no experience. But now we've partnered with several large institutions, and what we've done with them is they say, listen, we're dying for critical care PAs and we don't want to spend money to train them, and nobody really trains them. So you think a postgraduate program would be the answer, but there really aren't many. So what I'm doing now is I partner with many of these major medical centers, and our best trained PAs, our best and brightest can go into these critical areas like critical training, get 25 weeks of additional hands-on clinical training. So when they get out, they get hired by these institutions, and we can talk at another time where you can ask me questions about that. But the experience we've had in 2 years of the pilot is everybody that's worked in a clinical advanced specialty, whether it's orthopedics, cardiac surgery, critical care, ER, have all been hired from the hospitals that trained them. They fell in love with the program, and we don't have enough qualified. And when I mean by qualified, we're trying only to send exceptional students. And why is that? You've all been to PA school. PA school is hard enough as it is. I can't send somebody off for 25 more weeks of training and expect them to pass the boards if they're just an average student. So again, we have to prepare them for the infrastructure. For the students that fly through this stuff and don't have to study and do real well and just in their regular core clinicals, just kill it. Those students qualify and they go, and we've had nothing but great results. So the future of PA education from someone who really develops programs. I'm developing another 3 PA programs, if you can believe that. One in Chicago, one in California, and one in Middletown, New York in the process, and they're all ready to just about open. And Dr. Politi, who is one of my medical directors, will tell you that I do not agree with an entry-level doctoral degree program because it dilutes the degree. The nurse practitioners have done that, and it's a diluted degree. Unfortunately, the purpose of having a post-professional doctorate gives us the opportunity to codify our clinical experience. And more importantly, it allows us to compete with our APP or advanced practice providers who are out there with doctoral level degrees and are making more money and getting positions based on a degree, because we become a very degree oriented society. So we're just like always in the PA profession. I got in the PA profession just when they went from certificate to bachelor's degree. And soon after that, the nurses went to master's. So then we followed, we fought. No, we're an apprenticeship. We just need certificates. What happened? We got a bachelor's degree. And then we fought again with the master's. And here we are again, repeating history again, is now we're fighting over where does the doctoral degree fall. We're way behind the curve and way behind the 8 ball. And there's been some discussion about where this falls, but adding on some infrastructure education, post PA professional, post degree, so you can get out and work and then spend that extra money and get the doctoral degree. Advanced clinical opportunities and PA school, I already had said that. So next slide, I think I'm done.
Well, Dr. T, we've got some questions here, and
I figured that it's not, the warm milk is coming, so let's do it.
So the first one, and you've kind of already touched on this in Viet notes, this in the chat too, is obtaining a doctoral degree as a physician assistant helpful outside of academia? Are we trying to keep up with the nurse practitioners? And then there's another question after that, so I'll let you do this one first.
So I think it is the most critical thing in our profession, and it's one of the things I'm driven to really develop this particular pathway. And again, because if you look at the medical model, and I started to talk about this a little bit, Jennifer, you shut me down, but that's okay. We get to talk about it now. Is that we are in a medical model. And if you look at the medical model, what do? They do the infrastructure in school, which for them is 4 years undergraduate, average 4 years in medical school, an internship, a residency, which varies. And then they can even go on and do fellowships. So what have they done in the medical model? If we're going to call ourselves the medical model, is that they've created ladders that they can go up the ladder. So you can be a gastroenterologist and then do some kind of super specialty with gastro or something like that. Whereas in the PA profession, you can't. So what do? We go to PA school. We do usually 4 years of undergraduate. My program's on 90 credits, and so we save a year, but you still basically get a BS/MS degree when you graduate, and you get out and you start working. And Viet gave you a beautiful thing is that we can work anywhere. So what do? So if you work someplace for 3-4 years, Laura's working in cardiology, Viet's working in cardiology for all those years. So what does he get for that? He doesn't climb that ladder, but I'm sure he's brilliant. He's respected. His patients respect him. They call him doctor. No credit. So the doctorate, I think, is essential to codify that experience. It's to complete the ladder that we have not completed. It's to close the loop so that there is a pathway like there is for a biochemist or a physiologist or any other profession. That way you can work your way up to a doctoral level. They usually start low and they get high. So it's something to aim at. Does that for everybody? No, it's not for everybody. I know lots of PAs who have not, graduated years ago. Great surgical PAs, great cardiac surgical PAs. They don't have a master's degree. They don't need it. They're not concerned about it. It's not important to them. But again, I think, and at their level, and as long as they've been around, they're already making a salary, better than these young nurse practitioners or these other young practitioners that are coming in because of degree inflation. So it doesn't affect them. But I think for the younger generation that's coming in order to be competitive, and if we're really going to say we follow the medical model, we throw that out there, I think this is an essential part of that. I hope that answered the question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And then there's a comment here, which I just want to read to you so you can hear it. This is from Christian, and hopefully I said that right, Christian, that he thinks Christian thinks the DPA is helpful outside of academia as healthcare transitions from a series of small businesses into corporations. The DPA will train your floor leadership into the system. So kind of again, I think it kind of goes to your point a little bit, if I wasn't mistaken, Dr. T, that
Yeah,
as the industry changes. Go ahead.
yeah, and I think there's just one more thing I'd like to add that is, and I guess I just skipped over it because of Viet's presentation was so good, is remember the DPA is connected to a profession. This is a doctor, a physician assistant studies. It's connected to a profession. It has a place. It belongs there. Whereas some of the other degrees, I don't know where they belong. I don't really know what their intention is. It's not like a PhD or whatever. So they're very creative in what their degree is. I'm not really sure. I didn't develop them, so I really can't answer to that. But my specific doctor of physician assistant study degree is connected to the profession. It's specifically for that profession to grow. And Laura's point was, and in her slide there, if anybody saw that slide, said that a few of these programs are clinically based. This is a completely clinically based program. There is an option to go on and do the PhD part where you can do all the research, and there's a whole research track method, which will frighten most people unless you're like Viet, because it requires a tremendous amount of work. If you really want to be a research scientist, there is a pathway you can go down there. And we have people going down that pathway. But this was specifically designed, my dream is to close that pathway for the medical model and allow us the opportunity to get credit for all the clinical experience and knowledge we have.
Got one more question if I can before the milk comes in, Joe.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
I'm telling you, but 6 minutes, and that's it. Hannity's on. I get Hannity and milk so I can go to sleep.
How do you see the DPA and the DNP relating to each other in daily clinical practice?
Well, my wife is a nurse and a PA, so I really can't, I don't want to say anything disparaging against nurses. They're an essential part of the system. I think that it's an apple and an orange, that the nurse practitioners and the nursing model is very different than the PA model. So really, I don't really see a comparison at all. Again, I'm being very analytical and very selfish about this. This is purely for physician assistants to really emphasize and get credit for the knowledge and skills that they developed while they were in the profession. It's a way to check a box with a meaningful degree, a meaningful piece of paper that says, this, I've accomplished this. And Viet said it before. I'm a doctor. I worked hard for this. I got that, and they should get the same respect and admiration for putting the time in. Right now, a PA is a PA is a PA, and it's just not fair. It's just not fair. It's not equitable.
Yeah, may I add a comment onto that as well? I think that was Amy, right? Amy, you're sneaking around back there. We need to have your voice. I like this question, and I agree with Joe, is that it's apples and oranges. I think our model of training is much more in line with our physician partners, whereas it's hard for me to grasp around the DNP training. The way that each program is so different in terms of how they get the rotations in, and so it's hard to speak to a DNP versus a DPA. I like what Joe has said here, is that it's really next level training, our own residency / fellowship, so to speak, but very rigorous, because it has its didactic portion, and I know Joe, he's gonna slap smartness into us through this DPA. So it is next level from our training standpoint, from a PA training standpoint.
Well, I think with that, we shall let our fearless leader, Joe, have his milk. But Joe, thank you so much. And I think you said you'd be available for questions should folks have any after the fact.
Yeah, I have some ammonia inhalants here to keep me awake. So
he also is here for the 10 o'clock show. Try the veal. I mean, you gotta love this guy. With that, though, we shall turn it over to your partner in crime, Dr. P. Viet, do you want to take it away?
Okay, so I've got the slides there, and Dr. Politi, you're on.
Thank you, Viet. Thank you, panelists, and to all those who are listening out there. So, Dr. Tomasino, I think you very much understated your position in the PA world as far as your influence and the extent of which you have been involved in the physician assistant program throughout the country. I mean, I believe Toro has about 5 or 6 PA programs. You put 1,000 PAs under your belt that call you Papa and look to you for advice and leadership. I, as a CEO of a hospital, met the Toro crew when they were sending their students through, and met Joe and Joe DeLillo and a bunch of them. That is his senior staff, as they were sending the students through the hospital for various rotations. And I was very impressed, especially when he talked about the ACT program, because I was running a public benefit corporation hospital, a very underserved hospital. We're pretty big, one of the largest hospitals in the county. And we're seeing a good percent of about 50% Medicaid, 25% uninsured. So we really weren't making a lot of money, and our salaries, being a civil service hospital, weren't really good in a sense to compete with some of the other larger hospital systems here on Long Island, which, Long Island, you think of Long Island as a very rich area, a very prosperous area, but you don't realize there's a swath of underserved populations that sort of come from the Atlantic Ocean down by Freeport and Long Beach, and working its way up to Roosevelt and Hempstead and Westbury, and these patients really they counted on my hospital for their care, and we opened up the FQHCs, and we used a lot of physicians' assistants in there to get this care down to the underserved where it's really, really needed. And when you talk about the ACT program, I was having a problem recruiting nurses for the ER and the ICU and my OR because they were going to the higher paying jobs. So I started, finding nurses within my hospital and putting them into a fellowship program. So I put nurses into fellowships, and we're paying them for 3 to 6 months to be a fellow in the ER, or a fellow in the ICU or CCU, or in the operating room, which was a year fellowship. And I started growing my own. And so I was very impressed with the way they were thinking. I've been involved in PA teaching for about 20 years. I teach mostly emergency medicine. I'm an ER guy, ER doctor, been an ER doc for many years, a director, a chairman of a couple different ERs, and a chief medical officer as well. So I've had a lot of experience in emergency medicine. So I was doing some ER training and teaching some of the lecture series for that, for the PA programs. And I started teaching pathophysiology, which has always been my second love, and I teach pathophysiology currently for Toro. And doing that, Joe shared with me one day his vision, and he talked to me about the one rung ladder, and it made so much sense to me that here I have been working for all of these years, over 20 years with PAs, who counted on them. Who, I mean, I remember the first, and this doesn't sound really, beautiful and glorious, but I remember I had a patient in the ER with this horrible hemorrhoid, and I was like, geez, what we're gonna do? This guy's in so much pain. And a surgical PA came down and said, Doc, please, let me show you how we lance this. And we anesthetized the area. He cut it open. And this guy, when we finished, got off the stretcher and hugged the PA. He was in such relief. And I said, well, my God, I mean, here I am, a doctor for 20 years in the emergency department, and I'm learning from these PAs, and I'm gathering information from them. And I'll get an EKG, and when you're in the ER, you're sitting there, you're taking care of your patients, and you'll get, you'll constantly you're running X-ray over to the next doc. Say, what do you think of this X-ray? What do you think about this EKG? And I found myself doing that with the PAs and running over to the PA, going, is a Mobitz type 2, or what do you think? Is it third degree heart block, or am I just making this up? And and I trusted them, and I worked with them, and I learned from them. And when Joe came to me with this concept of, hey, we're PAs and we love being PAs, and I remember him telling me, Vic, if we wanted to be a physician, we would have went to medical school. And when you look at the grades of the kids that he has coming into his program, every one of those kids, every one of those new students, they're 3.6, they're 3.7s, they're 3.8s, they have research, they've worked in clinical environments, they've got master's degrees. I'm saying every one of those potential PA students can easily get into a medical school. And yet they don't. They chose to be physician assistants. And so they don't want to be physicians. They want to be PAs. They like the lifestyle. They like the idea that they can be in a specialty that they choose. But after 10, 15 years as a cardiology PA or an emergency room PA, they need to get some sort of recognition. And Joe uses the word codify, and I've used it a lot since he's put it into my mind, that to codify their experience, to understand to make people understand that, hey, I did my PA, I'm a board certified physician's assistant. And now I've done all this work and I want to take it to the next level. So this DPA program made such sense to me. So we sat down and with him and Mary Flanagan and Kristen Paglin and Bill Coelho and Don Rungo, his whole crew, and I know I'm leaving people out, sat down and they said, this is what we want to do. And they came up with 14 different subjects, each 3 credits. And things like evidence-based medicine, clinical pharmacy and therapeutics, 1, 2, and 3, legal aspects of healthcare, some statistical analysis. And they came up with basically 700 through 709, those 9 classes of really, truly clinically minded, clinically focused classes where the PA will sit there online with a professor. I teach, for example, evidence-based medicine, and they'll have to do 2 posts a week. I'll put out a question, and they'll have to respond to that question with research. They'll have to put a little bibliography where they, to support their conclusion, to support their hypothesis. And then we will then have a discussion online between the various students, whether it's on COVID or use of lipid-lowering therapies versus exercise, and we'll put that together. So there's 2 posts a week, and those semester is 8 weeks. So they'll do that. And I know Viet was saying it's really strenuous and it is a lot of work. And this is really requires you to do some work, but you time yourself. So if you want to take the 1 class every week, most people take 2 classes every 8 weeks. But 1 is fine. If you want to take a little break and take an 8-week block off, you could do that. But you go through those 9 classes, really getting a lot out of it and really codifying and speaking to your specialty. So you'll pick a subject, say in your 700 or 701 class, for example, you want to deal with, the patient that you had with C. difficile colitis from antibiotic use. And you do a lot of research on antibiotics and C. difficile, and you get clinical studies and you get some anecdotal information and you put it together and you present it in my evidence-based medicine class. And you move it into the pharmacology class, Pharm 1, and you start talking about the clinical pharmacy and therapeutics of that. And then maybe you'll go onward in Pharm 2 to take it into some, other types of a higher level of therapeutics that they might do, maybe fecal transplants and things along those lines. And that just progresses right through those 9 classes until you get to your final 4 classes. And then at that point, you go into the proposal. You'll come up with a proposal, whether it's a clinical study, whether it's a research project, or whether it's some sort of thesis or poster. And you'll then put all that information that you did over the last 9 semesters, the last 9 classes. And in each class, by the way, there is a signature assignment. So not only do you have 2, you have to post 2 times during the week, there is 1 signature assignment, which you'll make on your paper. So by the time you get to 710, which basically is more of a statistical research problem, to talk about the doctoral management system. And by the time you get there, you have all this information, all this data, all these signature papers. You just sort of combine them into a nice flowing paper that you present to a panel, and you choose your own panel. So there's a list of physicians or PAs that have obtained their doctorate, PhDs in particular subjects. So, for example, cardiology. There'll be a list of cardiologists that you could choose to be on your dissertation panel, on your panel for your project. And you could choose them. So you can say, okay, Dr. Politi, I want you on my panel. I want, Dr. Sebasta, and I want Dr. Trezerna on my panel. And those will be the 3 doctors that are going to review your paper and help you take that paper from the 710 class and mold it into the 711 class, where you put in your anecdotal bibliography. And you then, if you need to get an IRB, we have an IRB. There's a form you fill out for if you're going to do any IRB, and it goes to the Toro IRB and they'll TUW IRB to approve it. And then it moves forward to the final presentation. You'll present to the committee what your doctoral thesis is, your doctoral program, your project, or your clinical study or a poster. You'll present that, to that panel, and then that panel will then discuss it and see whether or not they're going to grant you the doctoral degree. And then you have your doctoral of physician's assistant. And I like the name doctoral of physician's assistant because it tells you who you are and what you are. And you're able to take that and basically, once you have that paper, that's a publishable paper. That's a paper that you've done research on, that you are the lead author on. You have all this other backup to help you do it. And in no way and never are you alone. It's a very robust discussions that go on during those semesters. So everyone is basically, throwing ideas at you from, the other PAs in your class, all very constructive. Sure, there's some constructive criticism involved, but everybody's just sort of working together and helping you get to that point where, you finish that one class and you move that particular subject into the next level, constantly building on it, constantly getting deeper and deeper into that subject. And let me tell you, some of the things that you guys are coming up with are like, really, I read journals every day. I get the Annals of Internal Medicine, the Annals of Emergency Medicine. I was reading the Mayo Clinic today. Things that I'm reading these journals are nowhere near what I'm getting as from you guys, from students coming to me in this program. So the amount of knowledge that you have as a PA, the amount of background, of clinical experience, that what you can bring to the table in medicine, you really don't understand. I'm an outsider. I'm a physician. I'm watching you guys from afar. I'm seeing how you operate. I feel so comfortable in my world when I'm working with a PA that I know. And listen, there are good doctors, there are bad doctors. There are good PAs, there are bad PAs. But when you work in the emergency department, you know who your PA is. You know what you can go after. They're over in that fast track or urgent care area, and they're calling you over. You know something's up. And if I'm having a problem over on my side, they're coming over to help me too. So it's a teamwork, and it's building on that team. So truthfully, I really think the time has come for this degree. I think the time has come for physician assistants to have that recognition. I work with a lot of nurse practitioners. I do have doctors of nursing working with me as well. I have a lot of respect for them. I see them different. I see them working with a different type of focus. You guys walk in that ER, into that clinical practice, or into the urgent care, and there's a dozen charts in that rack, and you grab those charts and you get on that computer and you just start rocking and rolling. The nurse practitioners, as you know, it's a different mindset. It's a different practice model. And they are amazing at what they do. And I love them for what they do, but it's different. And, the physician's assistants have really proven to me to be a great asset to me in my job on a daily basis. And let me tell you, I've hired hundreds of them, hundreds of physician's assistants, both in the hospitals and the various emergency departments that I worked in. And you've had some good guys and some bad guys, just like you have in any profession in the world. And I think this DPA would be the next step in order to codify, sorry, Joe, I'll use your word again, codify those backgrounds so that you can go on to the next level.
Dr. Politi, there's been some great chat about you. You're inspiring a lot of people. Viet, it looks like you've been kind of engaging in the chat a little bit. Do you want to summarize some of the questions or comments that you're seeing?
Yeah, so, as you've been speaking, gosh, just great stuff here with regards to, moving that knowledge, the DPA, where you're taking people from that baseline PA school. We've been fed all this information, and then you just kind of treat based on that. And now you're taking them to the next level where, a specific disease and or diseases, and having PAs delve in deeper, learn the pathology, learn all the treatments, learn the science behind it, and then presenting that, going through into your evidence-based medicine courses and to the end. And what the comment that came up, and Kevin could ask this question again, he asked it to the panelists, is there a thought here that when they get to that dissertation, they've done all this work, they've cited it, there's references, they've worked with a panel committee, so to speak, for their dissertation, move that to a publication, and have a pathway there, a flow that you know, whatever committee member says, hey, you know what, this would work exactly well for the Journal of American College of Cardiology, or I'm you know, in cardiology, I'm a little bit biased there. So, you know, into Journal of Nuclear Cardiology, whatever. I'm actually not sure what other journals are out there. Is there anything beyond cardiology? But you know, helping them move that work, that body of work to a publication. I think. So what are your thoughts there?
So, I mean, that's one of the greatest things about being with the Toro system. The Toro University system is not just, you know, Joe and his, you know, he's got the Bayshore, the Newmark, the Manhattan PA schools. They're opening up one in Middletown in Chicago, and also in Puerto Rico. They're going to have the first ever PA school in Puerto Rico. Absolutely amazing. Unbelievable accomplishment. People have no idea what went on behind the scenes to open up the first and only PA school in Puerto Rico. But TUW, Toro University Worldwide, is part of the Toro University system, but they are basically a research-based training program. They have PhD programs, research programs, and they've published thousands, literally thousands of articles in well-researched peer-review journals. So they are biting at the bit to get your paper, to help you, and to get you published. I mean, they have a whole resource. They have their own library. They have their own IRB. They have really the resources that any one of us can jump right into, and they have people that will mentor you, stand by you, and work with you. As a matter of fact, on the outside, as you're going through the DPA program, you have access to them, and a lot of them are really wanting to get involved with you to help you to publish this, because it looks good for you, it looks good for the university, and let's face it, it's good for the profession. One of our doctoral mentors who's on the committees, Dr. John Sullivan, who's a leading researcher here in New York with one of the top medical colleges, is available on the panel. So you can choose Dr. Sullivan, who basically is the go-to guy. If you want to publish an article, you'll send it to John, and John will look at it and say, hey, listen, I would do A, B, C, and D on this. And he's available. The guy's amazing. He dedicates his entire life to research. He doesn't even practice clinical medicine anymore. He just does the research for this, you know, really probably one of the top medical schools over here in New York, and is available as one of the mentors for the students. So yes, that's exactly where you should go with this. Publish this. And you know, being in academia, and a lot of the PAs, after practicing for 10, 15, 20 years, maybe they want to get out of that ER. Maybe they want to get out of clinical practice. They may want to become a professor in one of these universities. They may want to go into academics. You need that. It's publish or perish. You know that in medicine, in academia, publish or perish. And how about administration? We have tracks for administration. One of the biggest hospitals in Long Island, the CEO's a PA, really great guy. I mean, the PAs, there's no stopping you guys. I mean, you have the energy, the motivation and intelligence to go anywhere you want to go, but you need to have certain, you know, the keys to open certain doors, and having a doctoral degree or a DPA at the table in the boardroom means a lot. And, you know, take it from me. I've been at the table of the boardroom many times. I've been attacked and beaten at the table of the boardroom many times. So I know what it takes, because people throw those things at you. I'm lucky. No, hold it. I got my MBA. I got my fellow. I'm a fellow of American College of Physicians. I'm a fellow Emerging College. So I don't know what the one is after the name there, but that's pretty good. I guess I'm a FAC.
I was noticing that as well.
One, but that's pretty cool. I thought it looked pretty good, so I left it.
Number
But it being that when you have this type of, look, these letters after your name, we know they're nothing. They're alphabet soup. I could be the worst doctor in the world. I don't know the difference between AFib and a fracture in the tibia. But the bottom line is that people don't know that, and they see this. Just like when you put on that white coat, you walk into that room, everybody thinks you know what you're doing. It's all part of it. But when you earn it and you did it and you got that degree, and you could talk the talk and walk the walk, it really means a lot.
Thank you so much for that. We have about 10 minutes left. Viet and the whole crew, I just want to make sure that we get questions. This is such a panel with deep knowledge. So are there other questions for the panelists at large? for Dr. Politi specifically, I want to just make sure we use our last 10 minutes to make sure we to make sure that we get those questions out there. But I think this is such good information. And I don't know if there are other slides too, Dr. P, that you want to share.
No, that's, I just wanted to get across the DPA, and there's nothing better than just a big DPA staring at you to get that point across.
Okay, we've got Amy, you are on fire with the questions tonight. Amy asks, how do you see the ACC PA/NP competencies play into our career trajectories and this degree conversation?
Is that to me, or is that to one of the smarter panelists that could actually handle that one?
Dr. P, we'll start with you, and then I'll be watching the panelists on their videos to see if they want to chime in as well. But I think it's a great question for the whole panel, but we'll start with you.
As long as they didn't give Dr. T, his milk yet. Did anybody see Dr. T drink his milk? No.
Oh, look, he woke up.
Got it. Oh, man. So with that said, could you repeat the question?
Yes, absolutely. So the question is, how do you see the ACC PA/NP competencies play into our career trajectories? And I think this question goes back to the presentation we did back in July, and then in this degree conversation. So maybe actually I will let Viet start with the discussion and then pass it over to you guys.
Good.
Yeah. And I would like to hear Dr. Politi's comments after we kind of quickly summarize. So the ACC competencies, you know, the American College of Cardiology, we, a group of us, including Laura here, put together these competencies for nurse practitioners and PAs in cardiology. So, you know, our cardiology partners have their COCATs, and that delineates all the competencies that you should have or that you should meet in order to practice at certain levels. And so that also goes into the subspecialties. They'll have, you know, tier 1, 2, and 3, or step 1, 2, 3 in terms of their training levels. You know, if you say someone that knows echocardiography, you want them at a level 3 in order to be a director of an echo lab. And that connotes that they've had experience at deep levels in, you know, TAVR, in teams where they're doing CT, MRI, and echo, et cetera. So speaking back to this codification, I just love this new word that we're all learning. So the competencies in my mind, what they do is they establish a baseline of what we think, or not necessarily a baseline, but actually where we want people's trajectory to be for their education if they're going to practice in cardiology. And in this case, the competencies covered, you know, general cardiology, vascular, covered heart failure. I'm probably missing other pieces here, Laura.
Coronary artery disease, you know, electrophysiology, structural heart. Yeah, it was so thorough. It took, I think it was about 2 years to go through and work with physician colleagues, nurse practitioners, and PAs to really highlight where should we be in our cardiology, like you said, the horizon that we're shooting for. So it's a great training document. It's something my practice has used as we're onboarding new PAs and nurse practitioners. As far as how do we use the competencies into degree conversation, you know, I think there's been murmurings, you know, especially among the nurse practitioners, about can we use these to get some sort of certification, since we don't have a CAQ exam, you know, for AAPA. Is there a way to use some of these bullet points? But I haven't heard any movement of that in the PA kind of sphere, but there are a lot of possibilities. It was just published in March of this year, so I think we still have time to see how that might be used. And I just want to add, you know, whether it's being involved in the core competencies or working on a DPA, I'm so inspired, or this certification, all these different certifications or fellows being acknowledged, opening these doors. I really think gaining this knowledge in any of those pathways, for me, has really been a balm for burnout. You know, with COVID and a pandemic and jobs changing and everything, I have seen so many of my colleagues kind of throw in the towel. You know, it's too exhausting, there's too much. But I have been invigorated to have a little extra time on my hand here and there, or get more involved and really advocate for our patients, for our profession, you know, as PAs, and for our specialties, and even within my department, and just help elevate out of that burnout realm. So it's a little counterintuitive, but I think these fantastic speakers we've had is just really inspiring to think, what else can we do? Like you said, Joe, the one rung ladder, it's stagnant. And so what are some things to bring yourself out of that?
And just to segue from that, as far as the DPA program, all of these competencies, anything that you determine is of interest to you that you really want to delve deeper into, you could take that in this program and do the research and the background and really utilize that as your project. That's going to be your project, and at the end, publish it. So it will help you certainly in whatever field you chose to be in, cardiology in particular, and utilize that to help you in your career.
I love that. I love that. It sounds like it's kind of an a la carte model where you kind of come with your ideas and then it just kind of plugs into this process for the DPA. From my own personal experience with the DMSC, the Doctor of Medical Science, one of the courses that I had was in healthcare leadership administration was developing kind of a QA/QI project. And actually what I ended up using was what I had already done, which was build a lipid clinic. I came back from a National Lipid Association conference back in February 2019. And I've always thought we've been not very good at treating lipids in particular and implementing guidelines. And I came back to our institution and I just said, look, this is the game plan. This is what I took from there. And I brought everything back, the resources needed, what my plan was in terms of primary, secondary prevention, and then found a director. Next thing you know, we have a lipid clinic. And that's what I presented for the DMSC. And they said, well, geez, you already took something that was supposed to be theoretical or hypothetical and developed it. And, along the way, what I've done is just ramped up all my lipid knowledge as well. And now I'm a source of consultation for many of our general cardiologists, as well as my APP colleagues. But it's amazing how many calls I get on lipid questions.
So guys, I want to be mindful of time. I think there was a question in the panel, in the chat, not in the panel. There was a question about where the resources be available. So what we do after every one of these is we send out the recording link, and we also send out a PDF of all of the slides. And then, of course, and I think it's already in the chat, but APAC, our group email is in there. And let me just make sure that I've got it here. apaccontact@gmail.com. Oh, also, yes, Viet, will you just remind everyone about that? Because that came in right before we started. So I just want to make sure we get all the housekeeping stuff done. And that is one big important housekeeping piece. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah. So remember that it's an hour and a half of CME, and we were able to work and get those objectives in there and accredit this webinar. So please do take advantage of that and get your CME credit.
Well, we look forward to seeing all of you again. I want to thank our panelists for the information, the education. Lindsay and I are your helping hands, and we're excited. We're like, maybe we should become PAs. We are thinking all kinds of things now. But thank you all so much. Thank you to our attendees. Again, we will have all of this information available on our website and in an email. We'll get that out tomorrow. And it looks like we have one more comment. Let me make sure I saw that. Dr. T, did you want to just make a quick comment? Oh, or Joseph Dello, I think.
Yeah. Joseph,
okay.
Can unmute.
Hey guys, so I just wanted to speak. I've been with Dr. T a long time, so I tease him. I say I'm the real Joe. So funny stuff. So I laughed when you were talking about the competencies because I was one of the reviewers on the cardiac competencies for PAs, and it was amazing. I would tell you that kind of served for a roadmap for me. I looked at the competencies and I said, you know what? I know about 75% of this, and I've been practicing for about 20 years, urgent care, family practice, and cardiology. But it's time for me to know 100% of these competencies if I really want to live up to it. So I'm just going to segue into that's what the DPA did for me. I'm going to tell you that I am currently one of Dr. Politi's students in the DPA. I am about 2 weeks away from starting my final project. It has been tough, dealing with COVID, dealing with my profession, and dealing with trying to do my work. But we all strive to get through this. But what I really want to point out is something, we've used, I call it the C word, the codify word. We try not to say it. I yell at Dr. T that we said it after 5 times, we can't say it anymore. But I would tell you that this DPA program is really something that is putting my life together, and merely my life as a PA. I'm going to give you a quick synopsis of my background. So I'm PA for 20 years, family practice, urgent care, cardiology. I'm also a military PA, served with Dr. T for the last 10, 15 years in the military. Actually, privileged to serve with him in family practice for a couple of years as well. And I teach at Doctoral College, where I'm now risen up to the director of all the clinical operations for our 3 programs and our developing programs. So where do I go from here, right? That's the big question. How do I get to the next step? That one rung ladder that Dr. T spoke about. And really the next step for me is all in education. It's for me to take my requisite skills and knowledge that I've gained over the last 20 years, whether in clinical practice or education, and take it to the next level. And that's why I felt the DPA came in. Why I really, this program looking at some of the others really appealed to me is because it really makes sense to me. Doctor of Medical Science, I researched that. I said, I'm a PA. What am I going to be as a doctor of medical science? Am I going to be a science teacher? It kind of didn't make sense to me. And then I said, you know what? A PA is a PA, just like the DNP, just like the DPT, just like now the DPA shall really equate to what I do in my career. Dr. Politi briefly spoke, and I just want to really elaborate on the area of interest. From the second you get into the DPA program, you're pushed to develop your area interest. For me, it was cardiology right out of the get-go. So whether it was making a PICO question about, how I'm going to look at left ventricular ejection fraction on certain patients and move through, or it's my final project with Dr. Politi is developing it with me, is I'm looking at the cardiac manifestations of COVID-19. And my ultimate goal is to really try to do a systematic review of the literature and maybe develop some guidelines to stratify risks such as increased troponins, decreased left ventricular ejection fraction, and even patients who just come in with symptoms. So something truly comes out of my work that can go forward and help other cardiac PAs, other cardiologists, ER docs, and so on and so forth. So, I'm a big proponent of the DPA program. I'm in it. I did it. I can tell you it's a wonderful thing. I can tell you that it's definitely going to move me into the next spot, whether it be clinically or educationally. I can tell you that this group right here, APAC, is a big part of, me being a PA and me moving forward, to do wonderful things in cardiology. And I think we're stronger together. So, there's some wonderful people here. I can't tell you I would be part of this group if it wasn't for Dr. T, if it wasn't for Kevin Niles, if it wasn't for Vic Politi. So just testament to you guys that, other people, it's important to mentor other people. I can tell you that guys like Dr. T and Politi don't come along, every day. And it's important that they mentor me. I go forward, mentor somebody else, and we go on and on and on. Our profession has been around since, 50 years plus. And I think it's an important thing that we go forward. So thanks a lot, guys, for giving me an opportunity just to discuss this.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you so much for that. And 2 things. One, mentorship. Let's put that bee in our bonnet to talk about mentorship and pathways, because no matter what COVID throws next, I think this moment, one of the reasons we started doing the webinar is so we could have togetherness, so that we could be together even when we're apart. And Laura, you talked a little bit about that, but mentorship is on my mind. And then I think it's DeLeo. Joe, I thank you for being gracious about me saying your name incorrectly for at least an hour now. So we will send out information about the CME. We will send out the slides. And I think the other thing I would ask Viet and Lindsay is to maybe see if we can schedule some time again with Dr. T and Dr. P to talk a little bit more about this program, because it sounds like it's something that would just be helpful for our members, especially those who couldn't join us tonight, to learn more about. So with that, I will let everyone gracefully exit for their milk and cookies, their Snuggies, their Fluffies, whatever else you got going on out there. Thank you all so much. Let us know how we can be of assistance. Thank you so much. And good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.